Thank you, Rita.
Hey, everybody. Like, hey.
Who enjoyed this morning or already or today? So we just thought it'd be good to have a chat to get to know you a bit more at the 12 o'clock service. Welcome to the 12.
Yeah, 12. We're pumping this morning.
And as we've just acknowledged, Hannah Ray, we're in a season of transition, and it just so happened, like, as we talked and prayed together, you're like, it's kind of weird, Josh, like, this never happens, but I have 2 months free.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, normally, like, June and July are pretty busy conference months and women's conference months and event, months for summer. So I just talked to my booking guy, and I was like, how come we don't have anything on the calendar for June and July? And he's like, well, I don't know. There's just nothing on there. And 2 days later, I had this connection. So I actually really felt like the Lord was like, go sow for the summer. So, and I actually love that. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. During the week, Monday and Tuesday, I mentor. So I'm online with worship leaders from all over the world and creatives from all over the world that just need help, that just need encouragement. So there's so much power in encouragement. So I'm here to encourage your team and just really encourage them to go into the next level of what God has for this church. So.
Well, thank you for saying yes and being our worship pastor in residence for the summer, which is really beautiful. But tell us a bit about your background and where you come from and just a bit of your journey.
I was born and raised in California. A lot of people think I'm a New Yorker. I think it's the husky voice. They all think I'm from New York. But I now live in Nashville, Tennessee with my son, Justice, who's 19. And I came up, as a young teenager loving music, but I was in a church called The Vineyard. And they were really part of what put worship, the way we sing worship now, kind of on the map. And so I started writing songs really early on for Vineyard Music Group. Wow. And those songs started going all over the world. And then I just got a record deal and started touring all over the place. But worship's been my heart. So I've really stayed in the worship realm. And I am so grateful for my journey, because my journey really was worship before it was a celebrity culture, because sometimes we see it more as a celebrity culture now. And I came up when we were writing songs, and we were our little green rooms, our conversations were, did you hear who got healed last week in service? Like, those were our conversations, And so I kind of come from that stock, and just the belief that worship is relationship with the Lord, and it is a weapon. Yeah. And I just use it as a weapon. So I'm slaying hell constantly with that. So anyway, it's my background. Yeah.
Amazing. So was that after John Wimber's time, or?
No, actually, I call myself kind of a John Wimber baby. I walked into to a Vineyard church when I was 16 from a Baptist church. My mother was a Baptist secretary. She was the secretary at our Baptist church. And I remember being like, they had round tables in the room, and we ate like coffee and donuts or muffins, which was so sacrilegious at the time. You just were like, but the presence of God came into the room, and I realized, oh my gosh, we're singing songs to the Lord, not about the Lord. And that encounter just completely transformed my life. Now, I wanted to run screaming from the building because I was freaked out by it at first. But it had this insatiable thing that I wanted to come back the next week to see if I could get that feeling again, where I could feel this presence around me telling me that everything was going to be okay, because nothing else was telling me everything was going to be okay. So I'm so thankful to the Vineyard for that, because they gave me that encounter with Jesus. And I could come as I was, and I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to be perfect for the Lord.
What do you think, reflecting on that time and what you've experienced, what does the church today need to recover, and what do we need to step into? I mean, there's a lot in that, because there's a lot we need to recover probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we talk about worship, now the church, the language of worship is kind of like the culture of worship is this, music thing. And it really has nothing to do, I do always say, I think I said it on there, that that's an extension of or an overflow of what really should be going on internally with us. But you can't have an internal encounter with the Lord unless you actually lean into the Lord and trust the Lord. And a lot of us don't have that because we've not learned to trust, to have faith, because what we've seen in the church is actually deconstructing what we believe. And the presence of God, I think, is so powerful because he doesn't need a human being. I think he loves to work with us and he loves us, but when he can't use us because we're stubborn, he'll just come in and he'll do it himself. And I think some of us just need a real legit encounter with Jesus, like the Jesus. You know, the Jesus who isn't here to scold and to condemn, but the Jesus who's here to embrace and to just hold on to. And and I think that that's what we need, you know, especially coming out of a post-COVID environment where there's distrust everywhere. He really is, he's one of the most trustworthy things I've ever encountered in my entire life, you know, so.
And what would your hopes be? I mean, I know it's your first Sunday and getting to know us, but what's on your heart for us as a church? And
yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, I always kind of lean in on, I think it's 2 Corinthians where it says, you know, I come to you in weakness and in fear with great trembling as I proclaim to you, Jesus, because I don't know anything except he died for me. And so it's really safe for me to stay there because it's the safest place to be. But prophetically, I pray for you, you know, since we've been talking, and I don't want to go anywhere without doing what God's told me to do and asked me to do. And so I'm always like, how do I pray for these people? Like, how do I pray you into these corners of this church? And what do I give them that encourages them that you're trustworthy? And I feel like he said, well, their name, first of all. He said, they're a fount. You know, you've changed your name recently. And I just felt like the Lord gave me this picture of a season of water being released in the atmosphere and living water. You know, the woman who met Jesus at the well was given something she'd never been given before. She was giving living water. And it made her prophetic and it made her a proclaimer. And I think that's a prophetic picture over this house, is that I think this summer God wants to turn on the sprinklers and he wants to bring himself in a way with living water. Yeah, and that may look different to everybody in this room, but the way that you go after the Lord is the only way that he can give himself to you. So if you rush him hard, he will rush hard back towards you. He's a gentleman, so he's not going to rush on you unless you want to rush on him. But I also felt like just the Lord talked out of, which, you know, you're going to talk a little bit about today with the prodigal and the one that God finds. But I've been really in Matthew with the prodigal, and God really speaking to me about what the prodigal means. And prodigal means wasteful. And so a lot of us see prodigal as those who've strayed, left the faith, walked away, and are living lives, you know, squandering, you know, all they have. And a lot of times, you know, if God were to count the prodigal in this room, a lot of it is attitude. And a lot of it is just, how do you waste the presence of the Lord on a day-to-day basis? And so I feel like the Lord just said, I want to actually kill the fatted calf for many. And that means that there's a returning. When we think about the prodigal, we think about the leaving. When what the prodigal father does is he just waits for the return. I mean, he has two things. He gives the inheritance and he waits for the return. He doesn't go chasing. He just waits for the return. And I think God says there's a return in this room of faith and hope and life. And I don't think we can feel those things without miracles. And so I think we need to look for the miracles that God wants to bring, not necessarily the miracles that we need God to bring, because sometimes what we need and what God wants to bring are two different things. And I can just, adhere to this and give you, this is someone who's learned this the hard way. A lot of the times when I back off and say, why don't you give me what I need? I see the biggest miracles I've ever seen, you know? So that's my prayer for you, and that's my hope for what I feel like the Lord wants.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Amazing. Can we thank Rita for being here today? Thank you so much. Amazing, amazing.